Okay, so we are carrying on Daf Zayin Amud Aleph is where we got up to. We're concluding the dinim of Beitzah. We've been Masechet Beitzah. We've been since the beginning of the Masechet looking at different dinim that are connected to an egg, which is laid on Yom Tov or after Yom Tov, whatever it may be. We're coming to the last few halachot regarding this before the Gemara is going to switch topic. So yesterday we saw, maybe let's do the Beitzah again. We just pick up from where we were yesterday. So I guess 5-6 lines down from the beginning of the wide lines. Gufa השוחט התרנגולת ומצא בה ביצים גמורות מותרות לאוכלן בחלב. רבי יעקב אומר אם היו מורות בגידין אסורות. Right, so that was the Beitzah we saw earlier. Two different opinions in terms of if one finds the eggs inside the chicken, which are complete, can those be eaten with milk? According to, are they now eggs and not flesh? So according to Tanakama, yes. According to Rabbi Yaakov, it depends if they were me'orot begidin, if they were still connected to the sinews and connected to the flesh of the chicken, then they would still be considered meaty. We saw in Rashi this was a din Rabbanan, seemingly. So then, based on that machloket, since we've seen that machloket Tanakama and Rabbi Yaakov, the Gemara says, what we now understand based on the distinction between Tanakama and Rabbi Yaakov. The following Beitzah, which says, Tan Rabbanan, Aochel nivlat of tahor. So somebody who eats from a nevela of a kosher species. We said yesterday there is a special din of tum'ah for eating a nivlat of tahor, but it's only when one eats parts of the flesh. So the Beitzah makes a distinction. It says, Aochel nivlat of tahor, min hashalav shel beitzim, min ha'atzamot, min ha'gidim, min ha'basar shnidlash, min ha'chai tahor. So all these parts are not considered flesh. And included amongst that is shalal shel beitzim. Okay, this is late. We saw the diagrams yesterday. This is, I don't know if you have had breakfast or not yet, so I won't show you the diagrams again today. But that was the later stage where we assume that these are the shalal shel beitzim. It's already more, the eggs themselves are closer to being detached and closer to being fully formed and would not be considered flesh. Whereas in that case we say tameh. So said the Gemara, now man tana min hashalal shel beitzim tahor. Who's the one who said min hashalal shel beitzim is tahor? Amar Rabbi Yosef delok Rabbi Yaakov. This can't be the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov, because the Rabbi Yaakov Hamar imayu morot begidin asorot. It's exactly what Rabbi Yaakov said, that even if the eggs are fully formed, but they are still attached with the sinews inside the body of the chicken, then that would be that you cannot eat them with milk, that they are not yet considered eggs, they're still considered flesh. So therefore, that seems to contradict what this Beitzah says here, min hashalal shel beitzim tahor. So that was the first suggestion of the Gemara. That was Rabbi Yosef, right? Rabbi Yosef to look Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov Amar, so Malay Abai answers back. He says, Mimai. He says, maybe not so fast. Maybe there is a difference. Dilma ad kan lo kamar Rabbi Yaakov hatam el elinyani surah. Maybe Rabbi Yaakov only said it over there. You have to wait until if it's more begidim, that we still consider it to be flesh and not like an egg. That is regarding the isur of achila, of eating with milk, of kashrut. Aval elyan tumah lo. But maybe when it comes to tumah, we wouldn't say the same thing. Right? And this is where Rashi explained, all of this is going to be a din Rabbanan. So if you'll say that no, for tumah as well, just like Rabbanan made a gzerah regarding achila, they can make a gzerah regarding tumah. You are thereby increasing tumah, and Rabbanan don't just make zerot in order to increase tumah. If we're going to make all sorts of things that are actually tahor, call them tameh, then people are going to treat things which actually should be tahor as tameh, and that's going to lead to a proliferation of tumah, and that's going to cause problems, and therefore Chazal did not want to make those extra gzerot in that way. Okay, so that is one. So that is one proof, or one way of looking at the Beitzah. The Gemara now says, "Ikad Amri." There are those who learn differently. Ikad Amri. We've now focused on the beginning part of the Beitzah that said "Min hashalal shel beitzim tahor," but now it says "Ikad Amri man tana min ha'eshkol shel beitzim tamei." Focus on the second part. And when it says ha'eshkol shel beitzim, that this is going to be tameh, i.e. that this is considered flesh. It's not considered egg yet. It's still considered flesh. So Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yaakovi. So yeah, Rav Yosef says no. So this must be Beitzah must be according to Rabbi Yaakov because it's still moreh begidim. The Amar imayu marot begidin asurot. So once again, Amale Abaye answers back. Mimai de eshkol mehanach. Mehanach tetalia be'eshkol. Dilma eshkol gufei. So he says, Abaye says to Rav Yosef, hang on. You say that when we say the eshkol beitzim, we're talking about the eggs themselves. But Abaye says, maybe not. He says, Mimai de eshkol mehanach tetalia be'eshkol. How do you know that it's the understanding is that the eshkol is a sort of a piece of the flesh, I guess, part of the ovaries. That's how Rashi seems to understand. He says, Mina eshkol mi besara sidrasha beitzim adukim sham. So again, it's connected to the part of the chicken. But how do we know we're dealing with the actual eggs, or maybe we're dealing with the part of from where the eggs are connected to, and that itself is certainly flesh, right? Eshkol me'anach tetalia be'eshkol dilma eshkol gufei. Maybe it's the actual eshkol itself. We're not dealing with the eggs, but we're dealing with the part of the flesh of the chicken. Now, says Rabbi continues. He says, "Oh, you'll tell me it can't be talking about that because it doesn't need to tell me that. If you're actually talking about the flesh, obviously we know flesh is flesh, and that's going to be tameh. So why does it have to say that? What's the chiddush? Answer is you see that the Beitzah also talks about other parts, kukavan, bnei ma'ayin, which are other parts of the inside of the chicken. These are parts of flesh as well. And we know that they are. So why does it tell us that? It says the afal gav the basarninu, even though they are certainly flesh, since there are people who would not eat these parts, since they are not readily consumed by everybody, therefore you might have thought that it's different. It needed to teach us. Achanami, so too with this eshkol shel beitzim, since there are people who don't eat it, it needs to come and teach us. So therefore, at the end of the day, we have from both parts of the Beitzah of shalal shel beitzim and eshkol shel beitzim, we tried to prove whether this is like the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov or not, based on what he had said earlier, and the Gemara cannot prove it one way or the other. Because either you could say that there's a difference between the two Beitzot, one is talking about chila and one is talking about tum'ah, and the din is going to be different. Or you could say in the second part that the eshkol shel beitzim is not actually referring to the eggs; it's referring to the flesh itself of the chicken, and therefore it remains inconclusive. Okay, that is so. That is that. Now we have another Beitzah. We're about maybe 13, 14 lines from the bottom of the page. Tanu Rabbanan. Sounds like a somewhat obscure Beitzah. We'll see what it says, and then we'll see the Gemara is going to go immediately into the nafkamina that comes out of it. There is a nafkamina. So it says, Tanu Rabbanan, Kol shetashmisho bayom, nolad bayom. Kol shetashmisho balayla, nolad balayla. Kol shetashmisho ben bayom uvein balayla, nolad ben bayom uvein balayla. Okay. Says the Beitzah the following. When it comes to different species of animals, it says animals which cohabitate in the day are going to reproduce, right? Their offspring will be born in the day. Those animals, those species, which reproduce at night, will have the offspring will be born at night. And anything which reproduce either by daytime or by nighttime, the offspring will be born by day or by night. Okay, I don't know if this is scientifically backed up nowadays, but that is what the Gemara says. So kol shetashmisho bayom nolad bayom zot hanagolet. Right? It's going to give now an example of each case. This is going to be the nafkamina. What really interests us now is the chickens and the eggs, but as a result of agavoruche, the Gemara tells us other things as well. So it says anything which reproduces by day, it's going to be born by day. So zot hanagolet. That is a chicken. Okay. In other words, we discussed already previously. We saw there's two types of eggs. Chickens can have. There's the egg that comes from a rooster, and there's the egg that comes from it's warmed, heated in the ground. So here we're talking about an egg which comes from a rooster that will only be laid during the day. That's the Gemara's statement here. When it comes to where we said only produces at night, it's one night. That is an atalef. What is an atalef? So in modern Hebrew, an atalef is a bat, and it's a pretty broad consensus that also in the Tanakh, in Chumash, and in Chazal, when we talk about an atlef, it's talking about a bat. It's interesting, by the way, that the atlef is mentioned as one of the species when the Torah lists the bird species which are not kosher. Now we have a list of those birds which you cannot eat. Those are flying things, and listed amongst them is the atlef. So some have questioned, say, how can it be if the Gemara is talking, if the Torah is talking about birds? How can you include a bat, which is a mammal? How can it be in that list? And the answer is that the Torah is not going according to modern categories of taxonomy and classification of species. Came much later, but the Torah is listing a species in a way that's recognizable for us. So even though biologically it's not part of the same kingdom, it's not a bat, it's not a bird, it doesn't matter. It's talking about those flying things which we relate to in that way, and therefore the bat is included, and that's no problem. A bigger problem in terms of identification is that there are places in the Gemara where it is where it seems to here it's not explicit. Here we can explain it otherwise, but other places where it seems to indicate that the atlef lays eggs. Bats, there's a lot of confusion about this, but bats do not lay eggs. So there are those who've questioned, and different explanations are given. I saw there is one sefer which came out recently, a few years ago, that wanted to say that the atlef is actually the duck-billed platypus. That is quite a hard claim to verify, particularly when you say that the atlef, which is mentioned in the Torah, is definitely a flying creature. In any event, yeah, we're probably talking about bats. So it says, that is bats. Anything which produces can be by day or by night. That is Adam. Man and anything similar to it. Okay. As I mentioned, a somewhat obscure discussion in the Beitzah, but now we'll see how this is a nafkamina in terms of the chickens. What we said was that the chickens only lay eggs during the day. So what is going to be the nafkamina from that? Amama. Right? Our Beitzah said anything that produces in the daytime, the offspring is born, the eggs are laid during the day. This is the chicken. So lemay nafkamina. What is the nafkamina? Why on earth do we need to know this? Lichter of Mari Breder of Kana, the Amar of Mari Breder of Kana, because of the following din, which was said by Rav Mari Breder of Kana. He says as follows: Badak b'kina shel tarnagolim me'erev Yom Tov v'lo matzah b'Beitzah. We've gone through all the dinim about what happens if an egg is laid on Yom Tov or not. So we know there's going to be enough nafkamina. It's important for us to know if the egg was laid before Yom Tov or was laid on Yom Tov itself. So what happens if you go and you check in the nest of the chickens on Erev Yom Tov and there are no eggs there? Right? That's why he says, Badak b'kinash tarnagolim Erev Yom Tov, lo matzah b'Beitzah. U'lemachar ishkim, and you wake up on Yom Tov morning, u'matzah b'Beitzah, and lo and behold, there is an egg there in the nest. So we would have said, if we didn't know any better, said, okay, you checked yesterday and there was nothing there. You check now, the following morning, the egg must have been laid at night. But we said we have a principle: the egg can only be laid during the day. So therefore, he says like this: the egg is permitted because we can say that the egg was actually laid before Yom Tov. Right? You say alo badak, but wait a minute, didn't you check? And you saw there it was empty. So alo badak yafeh yafeh. Well, you'd have to say, apparently you didn't check so well. You must have missed it in the nest. If we have a principle that the egg can only be laid during the day, it must have been the day before. So I think it's Rashi who points out over here that when exactly does everything take place. So have a look, 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Me'erev Yom Tov in Rashi. He says, Me'erev Yom Tov you checked. Bein hashmashot. Teshuv lo yadai ela balayla. If you say you checked on Erev Yom Tov, right, you looked at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, so you still had the whole day of Yom Tov that the egg could have been laid. So he says, no, you checked on Erev Yom Tov, Mamashet Bein HaShmashot. So there was no more possibility that the egg could be laid after that until night. And then Ishkim, and you woke up the following morning, and you checked, Kodem Alot HaShachar. That was before Alot HaShachar, very, very early, before the day begins. That which it says you checked, it's coming to include extra, right? That even though you checked and you didn't find anything, we can't just assume that the egg was laid the day before because you checked. Nonetheless, it will still be permitted because the samchina na braita diktani, we rely on that what you learned in our braita diktani koshtash misho bayom nolad bayom. That it was in the day. And therefore, it's a certainty that the egg was not laid at night. So you checked the nest, the last possible time in the day of Yom Chol, and then you didn't find an egg. You then look the earliest possible time on the day of Yom Tov. So there's only been night in between, even though logically you would have said, the egg must have been laid at night, the night of Yom Tov, and therefore it should be forbidden for all the reasons we've discussed. Nonetheless, we say no. We say no, there is a certainty that the egg can only be laid during the day, and therefore it must have been before Yom Tov. We assume we didn't check well enough. That was what the Gemara said. And then it says me more than that. And even if you did check well, this is the din of Rabbi Yochanan that we saw. So then you'd have to say, okay, if you checked and there was no way, but we know the egg must be laid during the day. So we assume that the egg came out, the majority during the day, and then it went back in, and then it was laid at night. But we say, like Rabbi Yochanan, that we hold that it's considered that the egg was laid during the day, Erev Yom Tov. So says the Gemara, Eini, says, wait a minute, is this really so? V'ha'amar Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul Amarav. We have a statement of Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul Amarav who says the following. Badak v'kina shel tanagolet me'erev Yom Tov v'lo matzah b'Beitzah. This is precisely our case. You checked the nest on Erev Yom Tov and you found no eggs there. U'lemachar hashkimu matzah b'Beitzah. And the following morning, you woke up again before Alot HaShachar, you checked the nest and you found the egg there. Asura, it's forbidden. So here's our contradiction. We just said that in this case where you find the egg on the morning of Yom Tov, even though you thought you didn't find it there the day before, we have to assume it was laid during the day, and therefore it would be permitted. But now, Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul Amarav says the exact same case, but here he says Asura, meaning we assume that the egg was laid on Yom Tov, was laid at night. How can that be? How is that possible? Answer the Gemara, so that's the difference. We already said that here you must be dealing with an unfertilized egg. That which we said the rooster, the chicken can only lay the egg during the day. That's when it's an egg from a rooster. But if it's an egg which is laid, which is unfertilized, which is from being heated in the ground, that could be at night as well. So we have two statements, two contradictory statements. They're not contradictory because they're dealing with different cases. Rav Mari Breder of Kahana was talking about an egg from a rooster, and therefore you find the egg on the morning of Yom Tov. We say it's mutar. Rav Yossi ben Shaul Amarav was dealing with a case of an egg that's not from a rooster, and therefore you find the egg in the morning of Yom Tov, and we say that it's asur. The obvious question now, which we're going to ask is, well, how do you know? How do you know if the egg is from this or that? What does this then actually help us? So, says the Gemara, Iachi, the Rav Mari, Nami, Me'ara Safna. So, if that's the case, you said that you looked yesterday, you checked very well, you didn't find an egg. You find one now, and you say that it's forbidden because it was laid on Yom Tov. So let's say also, for the first case we said, of Rav Mari, say that the egg came from Arad Safna, it was not from a rooster, and therefore the egg was laid at night, and it's forbidden. Answers the Gemara, but no, you say that there was a rooster there as well. There's a rooster in the pen, and when there is a rooster there, then we assume that the egg came from the rooster. Says the Gemara, how do you know again? That may be the case, but it's possible that this time the chicken laid the egg itself, especially when you didn't find anything yesterday and you only found the egg now. Why do you have to be so far-fetched and say, actually it was laid yesterday, but we didn't find it? Just say it's Ema Me'ara Safna. So Ravina says, no, Gemira, we have a tradition. We assume that when there is a rooster there, that whatever egg is laid by the chicken is laid from the rooster. We assume that it's a fertilized egg. Ad kama. So what does it mean that there's a rooster there? How far away? Amarav Gamda, Mishmei Derav, Kohecha Deshama of the Amud, Kohecha Deshama Kale Biamama. Any place where you can hear the voice of the rooster during the day, that is close enough. That's considered that the rooster could get there to the chicken. Avar Rav Mari Uvda, Adshitin Bate. There was the case with Rav Mari when they found this egg. He said, so it could be 60 houses away. That is, but that's still considered that the rooster is close enough. Nahara lo avra. Okay, if there is a river, then this doesn't count. There's a river in between. We assume that the chicken and the rooster are not going to swim across the river. Avra. If there is a bridge over the river, then we say yes, they would pass. V'ika mitzra lo avra. If it is a very narrow bridge, apparently chickens are scared to cross over very narrow bridges, and therefore we say would not pass, and then we assume that it is a not an egg from rooster. Okay, all of this is to tell us whether we assume that there's a rooster there, that's and therefore whether the egg has been laid during the day or at night. Then says the Gemara, we're now on the fourth line, the Zayin Amud Bet. It says Hava Uvda v'Avra Mitra. Okay, there was once a case where this opinion seems to be challenging the previous one, because it says there was a case where there was a narrow bridge and the chicken crossed over. Okay, now ask the following question. B'mayu kimta. We've established our whole case is talking about what b'desafna me'ara. I like this. If you checked the nest the previous day and you found no eggs, and now you go and check the nest on the morning of Yom Tov at Alot HaShachar and you find the egg. So, in the case, Rav Mari said, in the case where there is a rooster there, we assume the egg was laid yesterday, we just didn't see it, and it's permitted. The case of Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul, case of Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul was that we said no, there's no rooster. We assume the chicken was b'desafna me'ara, and therefore the egg is going to be forbidden because we assume it was laid on Yom Tov. So it's that case the Gemara is now talking about further. It says b'mayu kimta b'desafna me'ara. So my area badak, ki lo badak nami. Meaning, why do you have to say the case is where you checked it, even if you did not check, even if you didn't check the nest from Erev Yom Tov, but you wake up on Yom Tov and you find the egg there, we say that it should be forbidden. We assume that it was laid recently. Kilo badak. That's the question. Kilo badak nami. Answers the Gemara. Kilo badak, because if you hadn't checked yesterday, eimamet mo havai, you could say. Okay, now we get into a din where it's called tliya, but you could assume that it was actually laid yesterday. So even though you don't know, so here's the case. Let's say Erev Yom Tov, you did not check the nest. Yom Tov morning, you wake up and you find the egg there. So we're saying, you have at least a safek to say that the egg is going to be mutar, because maybe it was laid before Yom Tov. Kilo badak. Now you're right. Kilo badak eimamet mohava. So if that's the case, ki badak nami eimayat taruba v'chazra. Well, then why? If you're going to have a din of tliya, you're going to say, even though I don't know for sure, but I could assume that it was laid yesterday and therefore the egg's permitted. Say the same thing, even if you checked. We saw an answer in the previous statement, right? Ki badak nami eimayat taruba v'chazra. Let's say like the din of Rabbi Yochanan, that the egg had come out the majority and then it had gone back in, and that's why you didn't find it yesterday. But we still judge it as if it was laid on Erev Yom Tov, and it would be mutar. Ki badak nami eimayat taruba v'chazrai ucht Rabbi Yochanan. So answer the Gemara, no, we don't say that, because the case to Rabbi Yochanan lo shachiach. That is an unlikely case. It's a likely case. The fact that you didn't check the nest yesterday, that gives you leeway to say maybe the egg was there already. But if you had checked it, we're going by a very, very far-fetched case to say that the egg had come out and then gone back in. So no, we don't say that. We don't. Yeah, there is a Tosfot here, which has an interesting point. It says, Kilo badak emamet mohave. If in the case where we say that you didn't check it yesterday, and therefore we can assume we can rely on the fact that the egg was actually laid before Yom Tov. Says Tosfot the following: says Im tomar ha beitzah davar sheyesh lo matirin. Over here we have a safek. What are we saying? I'm saying you didn't check the nest yesterday. I don't know when the egg was laid. Maybe it was laid yesterday. I didn't see it. Maybe it was laid at night. But so then, therefore, it's at least a safek, and I can say it's mutar. So that's what it says. We've already learned, and I think it was on a few dapim ago, that davar sheyesh lo matirin, we aren't going to be lenient. Why is it a davar sheyesh lo matirin? It means something which is forbidden now, but later on it will be mutar. Once it's after Yom Tov, it won't be muktar anymore, and therefore we say it's not batal. So he says, "Imken sfeika lechumra." So says Tosfot, the answer he gives is yesh lo ma. The shaniach. He says, no, over here it's different. Mishum de gam kisafna me'ala shachiach the yoledet bayom yoter min balayla. In other words, that this is it's more likely that it was the egg was laid during the day and not at night. So other Rishonim explain, and this might be the explanation of Tosfot, or might be an alternative explanation. That which we say the safek of a davar sheyesh lo matirin is where I have something which is forbidden, right? But here, I don't even know if the egg falls into this category in the first place. I don't know if the egg was laid on Yom Tov and therefore would be a davar sheyesh lo matirin or not. It might not even fit into that category in the first place, and that is the safek, and therefore over here we can be lenient. So that is what. So that's what we said. So kibadak nami emeistar rabav chazrai. Rabbi Yochanan, the Rabbi Yochanan lo shachiach. So we said finally the Gemara now just continues with another din, which has nothing to do with what we've said at all, but it is another meimra from Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul. So Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul Marav. Tuma shchika sakanta legiluya. So tuma shchika is crushed garlic, which is a sakana of gilui, of having it left exposed overnight. Says Rashi legiluya hanachash shoter mimenu, that we're concerned that a snake will come and drink from in motzom meguleh umatir bo eres, and will leave its venom inside. This is the din the Gemara talks about. We have a number of cases of a giloi of sakana, of any beverage, water, etc., which is left exposed overnight, and also peeled onions, eggs, and garlic, which are left overnight. We say there's a danger of sakana. A discussion amongst the poskim. That reason for that over here, it's a sakana of giloi because the snake might come and put its venom. Nowadays, when snakes are not really if you have a snake in your house that's putting venom in your drinks, then you have bigger problems. But hopefully that's not the case. The Gra, the Vilna Gaon, is I think still machmir regarding this din of giloi. There are others who are maker who say the reason doesn't apply today, and therefore we don't have to worry about it. In terms of eggs, onion, and garlic, that's a separate reason. The Gemara says that is an issue of ruach ra'ah, which is what brings the sakana. So this statement seems to be something in between. As I say, there are differences of opinion. I won't go into it now. Differences of opinion in the poskim whether these dinim we should still be concerned for it nowadays or not. Okay, so Adkan, we have finished the first main section. That's the first line of the Mishnah. The Gemara has now concluded, and now you remember there were three different machlokot between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel in our Mishnah. When we pick up next week, we'll start talking about the next one, which has got to do with the chametz and so on Pesach.
Did I ask a question, Rabbi Kenigsberg?
Yeah.
We were saying before, I may have misheard you, but roosters laying eggs. Roosters don't lay eggs.
No, right. Sorry. So to clarify, the chicken is laying the egg. The question is, was the egg fertilized by the
fertilizer? No.
Yeah. That's what I meant. I'm sorry if it wasn't.
Thought about that too. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Everyone. Take care.